Hello and welcome back to Diplomatic Talk program. In this episode, we are going to talk about relations between the European Union and Uzbekistan. But before we proceed, let's explore European Union.
The European Union is a political and economic union of 27 member states located in Europe. It was established by the Maastricht Treaty in 1993. The European Union has its own currency called the euro, which is used by 19 member states. The euro was introduced in 1999 and replaced national currencies such as Deutschmark, French franc and Italian lira in those countries. The EU is known for its commitment to environmental sustainability. It has set ambitious goals such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030 and becoming climate neutral by 2050. The EU has also implemented various regulations and initiatives to promote renewable energy, sustainable agriculture and circular economy practices. The European Union is a major player in international trade. It is the world's largest exporter of goods and services and the second largest importer after the United States. The European Union has also negotiated numerous trade agreements with countries around the world, aiming to facilitate trade and promote economic cooperation. 200 different languages are spoken across Europe. Of all these, only 24 are recognized as the official languages of the European Union. These include English, French and German. The most common language spoken in Europe is English, and 38% of the European population can speak it.
Now let's move to relations between the EU and Uzbekistan. Currently, Charlotte Adrian heads the diplomatic mission of EU in Uzbekistan. On April 23, 2021, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev received her credentials. According to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uzbekistan, this year she's completing her mission.
Since 1999, the EU and Uzbekistan have been working together through a partnership and cooperation agreement. The European Union provides financial support to Uzbekistan every year. Between 2014 and 2020, the European Union's financial aid to Uzbekistan increased to €168 million, a 124% increase compared to the previous year. The EU's development assistance has specifically focused on rural development, including sustainable water management, agriculture, vocational training and administrative reforms at the local level.
The EU has identified key priorities for 2021 to 2027, including effective governance, digital transformation, and the development of a smart and eco-friendly agri-food sector.
Uzbekistan has become ninth beneficiary country of the EU Special Incentive Arrangement for Sustainable Development and Good Governance. Starting from April 10, 2021, the EU has granted preferential tariffs to products imported from Uzbekistan, opening doors for increased exports and attracting more investments.
The trade flow between the EU member states and Uzbekistan has been flourishing since 2021, surpassing 4.6 billion euros in 2022. This impressive growth represents a remarkable 77.1% increase in Uzbekistan's exports to the EU and 63.9% increase in imports.
Trade turnover between Uzbekistan and the European Union increased by 11%, reaching 5.13 billion euros. EU exports to Uzbekistan made up 4.35 billion euros, while imports from Uzbekistan to the EU totaled 780 million.
Dear viewers, our today's special guest, EU Ambassador to Uzbekistan, Charlotte Adrian. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. Charlotte Adrian, my first question is how long you've been working in diplomatic mission?
I've been working as a diplomat here, in fact, in Uzbekistan for 3.5 years. But in general, in fact, I started in 1998, so it's more than 25 years. I started, in fact, in Kazakhstan, so it's a long time.
Can you tell us how is the simple day of a diplomat like you goes? How this looks like?
It can be very. It's very diverse. It can be that I start with a meeting in the government, with one of the ministers, or if I go, I can also open with a conference. Maybe a project needs to be launched, or participating in a conference which we are invited to by the government or by civil society. So, and then of course I also have a full team that I manage. So I'm also, in fact, I represent the EU, so I will go out and represent. But I'm also a manager because I also have a team to manage, and so I'm also in the office and making sure that everything is managed, and then people have the right things that they need for making their work as good as possible.
I also heard that in order to arrive to the office, you are not coming with the car, but you use bicycle?
That's yeah. Sometimes I try because, in fact, I have the opportunity not on the streets because that would be a bit dangerous, I think. Yes. But there is, in fact, the canal, and sometimes I used to, when it's not too cold or too hot, then in fact I did go also by bike, but mostly I have to say that I did come by car. I have to admit that I would have loved to do more, but
yes.
It was.
And how it is like, the ambassador of the EU is arriving to the office in the bike?
Well, I'm also a human being, and I come from a country where we bike a lot. In fact, where the bicycle is the main. It's in fact there are more people biking in Denmark than people driving cars. So for me, it's also a good, in fact, also an important example also to give, because this is also about greening the way we live. And the way we act in life is also really important. So this is also, it had also this kind of importance to sort of show that you can also take a bike.
That's interesting. You mentioned that you grew up in Denmark. How many languages do you speak?
I speak, of course, Danish, but I also speak French because I'm half. So, and my husband is French, so we also speak French at home. I speak English. I try to speak Russian. I did learn German in school, but I haven't spoken it very much. So yes, I do speak.
I think this is important for the diplomats to speak many languages, right?
It's also probably one of the reasons why you're interested in becoming a diplomat. It's when you are sort of opening up and want to learn more, and then that also comes with the languages. Because with the languages, you also have the culture. And you're opening up opportunities. So this is also why it's important.
As a child, have you thought that one day that you will become a diplomat?
When I was a child, it was not that, this was not in the cards. Because at that time, in fact, women, even in Denmark, it was maybe a bit more in the forefront to have more women in decision-making positions, or in diplomacy, but it was not. This is 50 years ago, or so. This was not that much in. It was not something that you would think of. But later on, when I started my studies, when I started, I realized that what I really wanted was not only to stay in Denmark, but I wanted to go, I wanted to discover countries, but I didn't want to go as a tourist. I wanted to go, normally we say expatriate, but I wanted to go as a migrant. I wanted to go and learn, to stay with people, understand the societies, understand the economy, the politics. I wanted to stay, and that led me, somehow it led me also to diplomacy.
You started your career as a trainee in EU Commission, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel at that time? How old you were?
In fact, I was 26. Mm-hmm. I finished my studies when I was 26, and I worked. I worked as a trainee in a fascinating. You've studied my CV. I was in a cabinet. In fact, there's something which was called the Forward Studies Unit of Jacques Delors, who was the president of the European Commission at that time. Now, we have Ursula von der Leyen, but at that time we had Jacques Delors, and he was a very forward-looking person, and he had a special, let's say, think tank of his own, where, in fact, I was so lucky to, in fact, to work and to do some research.
And after that, you become a head of the mission in Moscow.
I worked for an NGO. I had the opportunity to move to Moscow for opening, in fact, an NGO, which and that was in 1992. So there was a lot of people who were suffering from the high inflation, in particular the pensioners. And I opened soup kitchens, in fact, for pensioners. And yes, in fact, I was managing 50 soup kitchens and we were giving 13,000 lunches per day for pensioners, and then we also opened for refugees and refugee centers.
Have you faced any challenges in your career? You mentioned that at that time when you were a child, becoming a diplomat was something difficult for women. Can you tell us about the challenges that you faced?
I wouldn't say I have faced many challenges, but I agree. In fact, one of the things is probably that for women, there are still, also in Europe, there are still biases. And although we have very good action plans for women's empowerment, for getting women into decision-making procedures or making positions, and it's working very well. But it's true that this has taken time. So over the years, I would say that I've been very lucky. I really had people who also pushed me, but also, believed, in fact, and then gave me the opportunities to do all the jobs that I've done. And that has been fantastic. But it's true that there have also been times where there were biases, obvious biases, and that's women often have to work more. They have to work more, they have to prove more. And that's, of course, if you can call it a challenge, because it also it also means that you have to work later, more, and then, in fact, the work-private balance, the balance of working can become difficult, but I've always had the perfect support, both from home, but also from other people around me, and that's been very, very important.
You mentioned that the balance, how we can balance both family and the work, and we are women and we are expected to be good at home.
This is very much, in fact, I remember President Mirziyoyev saying in one of the meetings he did, that he had asked some men, so who is taking care of the children here, or who knows it was a school teacher of your children, and he was surprised to see that there were very few of the men who know. For me, this is one of the things you have to share. In fact, there is a workload in work, and then there is a workload when you come home. The dishes need to be done, washing clothes also takes time. All these things that have traditionally been for women can also and should also be shared.
We know that Europe is leading when it comes to gender equality, but what about Central Asia, in particular Uzbekistan? How would you assess?
We've seen the latest rankings, which are very good for Uzbekistan. There has been a lot of things that have been done lately for in terms of progress. It doesn't mean that it's good, but it means that the progress is there. We've seen the law on gender-based violence. We've seen lots of initiatives which are really important. But we also know that equality is not there yet. And I would say I have seen so many amazing women over the last 3.5 years, either in fact in universities, young women with lots of potential, or some in the ministries, but rarely, in fact, unfortunately, in decision making positions in the government, for example, can be done. We know now that, I understand that there is this wish also to have more women in the parliament, yes. And that's good, that's very good, that's excellent. But not only in parliament, also let's see in some of the other spheres of society where we know that there are some in the private sector, but maybe also more in the public sector.
When we compare with the West, we can see that the women were always fighting for their rights, for the right to vote, but this is not the same case here in Central Asia. As the ambassador who worked in Kazakhstan and is working in Uzbekistan, what do you think about that?
Maybe one of the things that I've noticed is that we often say, well, it's also about work balance. We spoke about it before. The fact that, for example, you're working a lot for example, in the government. There is a lot of work. This is a very dynamic country. A lot of things are happening. People are working all the time, and then there is this idea that in that case it's difficult for women because they also have to take care. So this is where you have to think also, okay, how can we adapt the system so that it's more fair, and that may mean also that you should in fact maybe try to work a bit less. We know that the productivity of people doesn't depend on the number of hours that you are in the office. In fact, in some of the countries we see that, in fact, where I come from, we see that the productivity, in fact, is increased when you have less hours, because people are not burned out, they are not tired, they can do more in less time.
So it depends on different factors.
It's multifactorial, yes. This is something that you need an action plan, and there is an action plan. And there's a very good action plan. So and often then it's a question also of implementation of the action plan.
So let's move to the bilateral relations between the EU and Uzbekistan. My first question is, what are the functions of the EU in Uzbekistan?
So EU in Uzbekistan is working as an embassy, which has a function of representation of the European Union, and we're working with also a lot with of course with Uzbekistan, but also together as a Team Europe with our member states. Sometimes we go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and we do a démarche on a question. We do it sometimes together or sometimes on our own. And then we have also a part which is, of course, political and press and information. We have a sort of also a trade part which we're looking at, and then a cooperation and development section, which is working on support, technical assistance, support to Uzbekistan. So we have different levels of cooperation with the Uzbek authorities. But yes, we represent the European Union.
Yeah, it is very unique because we do have European country ambassadors here, and when it comes to EU, are the functions quite same, or it differs?
More or less the same. One that we don't have a visa section. We don't do consular. Although, in fact, we do have meetings with the member states regarding this, but we don't do visas. So this is really at the level of the member states. And not all member states do it, but the ones that are doing it, definitely, this is at their level. But otherwise, we gather also our member states, and we have 11 EU member states in Uzbekistan. We meet, we discuss, and then, of course, representing the EU.
How has the relationship between EU and Uzbekistan developed in recent years?
So in the recent years, and also thanks to, in fact, the reform agenda, but in the recent years, the relationship have been very good. They have evolved in a very positive way. politically, we have had a number of high-level visits. At least since I've been here, we have had the High Representative and the Vice President Josep Borrell here. Sometimes we've had the visit of Vice President Schinas, came twice, in fact, already here. We also had, of course, Charles Michel, the President of the European Council. We've had a number of visits of our EU Special Representative to Central Asia and more. And I would say that on this side, this has been really fascinating also to see, because this is just the side coming from Europe, coming to Uzbekistan. But we've also had much more visits, in fact, from the Uzbek government, going to Brussels. We've had the Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement was initialed in Brussels, also with the presence of the government in Brussels. So we've had a number of very good and very politically important meetings, and we see that the strategic importance of Central Asia and Uzbekistan in particular has made, in fact, also these contacts much deeper and much better.
So my next question is, I think it's going to be very interesting for our viewers. You've mentioned about the strategic interests of both Uzbekistan and the EU, and one of the obvious interests of the Uzbek population here, businessmen, it's usually investments and partnership cooperations. What about the EU? What are the strategic interests of the EU here in Uzbekistan?
Things have evolved. In fact, in the beginning, we only had agriculture, but then came the reform agenda of President Mirziyoyev, and now it's completely opened. It's completely different than from before. Now we continue to work on agriculture because this is an important sector. It's an important sector for Uzbekistan, for jobs, for creation of wealth, but also for food security, for food. I mean, this is a very important sector. So we keep continuing to support the agricultural sector, but we have enlarged the support. We're also working on the greening of the transition to a more green and sustainable economy. And then we've been working a lot on governance, on digitalization. I would say these are new, let's say the way we work now is we have 3 focus sectors, but this is not the only thing that we do. In fact, one of the sectors for your viewers, I think one of the sectors that I'm particularly also proud to see and happy to see because there is such an appetite, is education. In fact, we are not working in the education sector as such, but with Erasmus and Erasmus Plus, there has been such an appetite from Uzbekistan to work between the universities in Europe and universities here. This appetite for knowledge, for developing the capacities, also the universities here, has been amazing. And then, of course, we are sending students also to Europe. For me, this is, I just saw now a couple of days ago, I saw the latest figures. There were 75 projects where Uzbekistan was, developed and wanted to participate. We don't have as much possibilities, as 75, but the fact that there is this appetite for science, for knowledge, for education, higher education is really, for me, is really key.
In your opinion, what potential areas of cooperation have yet not been discovered between EU and Uzbekistan?
There's one thing where it's really, I think it's important that we continue to work on and continue to deepen, which is if we want the EPCA, the Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, to work, the work which now is being started on anti-corruption, working also with the anti-corruption agency, working on the environment, working with the general prosecutor. All this work is really important.
Thank you very much. That was an amazing interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kata rahmat.
Thank you for watching us and joining us on this diplomatic journey. Stay tuned for our next diplomatic talk.